The United Sol Systems respectfully requests a pause for a structural audit. The laughter of 1,000 alien delegates filled the obsidian spire. To the Galactic Hegemony, we were a footnote. A rounding error. A Tier 3 species invited only to witness the sale of a weapon that could erase our sun, but 3 seconds later, the laughter died. The lights flickered, the billion-credit banking systems froze, and the Hegemony's invincible security grid went dark. As Elias Thorne unscrewed his pen, he looked the High Overseer in his 4 golden eyes and whispered, "I wasn't asking for permission." The Obsidian Spire did not just house the Galactic Hegemony's high command. It served as the center of the universe's most dangerous marketplace. Today, the air inside the Grand Atrium was thick with the scent of ozone and the static hum of artificial gravity. Thousands of delegates from the galaxy's premier Tier 1 civilizations sat in tiered balconies, their gazes fixed on the center stage. Floating in a containment field was the Star Eater, a sphere of collapsing matter the size of a marble, capable of snuffing out a sun in seconds. It was the ultimate deterrent, and every major power had come with their treasuries open. In the back row of the observers' gallery, almost invisible in the shadow of the Krillix High Command, sat the human delegation. They were Tier 3 upstarts, invited only as a courtesy to show them what real power looked like. While others clutched data slates programmed with trillions in credit bonds, the lead human diplomat, Elias Thorne, held only a simple, weighted fountain pen. High Overseer Valerius of the Hegemony stepped onto the central dais. His 4 eyes glowed with a predatory gold light as he surveyed the room. He didn't even glance toward the human section. To him, they were a footnote, a species that still used combustion engines when the Hegemony was folding space. Valerius tapped a control console, and the Star Eater's specifications scrolled across a massive holographic display. The bidding was not for credits, but for systemic assets, mining rights, Dyson swarm outputs, and habitable moons. The Krillix opened with 3 gas giants and a nebula refinery. The room held its breath. This was a display of raw, planetary-scale wealth. Elias Thorne didn't move. He simply unscrewed the cap of his pen, the soft click lost in the roar of the crowd. He wasn't looking at the weapon. He was looking at a small, vibrating sensor on his wrist. The bidding escalated with a speed that would have bankrupted entire sectors. The Hegemony's economy relied on the neural link exchange, a complex web of FTL communication that handled every trade across 100 star systems. As the Valorian sovereignty countered the Krillix with a bid of 5 core worlds, the lights in the Grand Atrium flickered, just for a microsecond. Most assumed it was the Star Eater's power draw, but Valerius noticed a red icon on his personal terminal. A minor trade route in the Outer Rim had just experienced a 0.01% delay in transaction clearing. It was an anomaly, a rounding error. He cleared the notification. In the gallery, Thorne finally spoke, his voice quiet but perfectly modulated to carry through the room's acoustics. The United Sol Systems respectfully requests a pause for a structural audit. A ripple of laughter began in the front rows. Valerius didn't laugh. His instinct for stability was too sharp. Diplomat Thorne, the Overseer hissed, his voice amplified by the chamber's drones. "This is an auction for a Tier-0 weapon. You are observers. You have no standing to request an audit of Hegemony proceedings." Thorne didn't stand up. He didn't raise his voice. He simply tapped his pen against the paper in front of him. At that exact moment, the holographic display showing the bidding prices froze. The red icons on Valerius's terminal multiplied from 1 to 1,000. The 0.01% delay had become a total freeze. The neural link exchange, the very foundation of Hegemony trade, was silently seizing up. The silence in the room became heavy, no longer the silence of anticipation, but the silence of a heart stopping. Thorne looked up, his eyes meeting Valerius's. "I wasn't asking for an audit of the auction, Overseer. I was notifying you that the audit has already begun." The Grand Atrium's atmosphere transformed from a prestigious auction into a command center under siege. High Overseer Valerius's golden eyes darted between the glitching bid screens and the motionless human in the gallery. "Guards, secure the human delegation," Valerius commanded, his voice cracking with a hint of uncharacteristic panic. But as the Hegemony enforcers stepped forward, their heavy pulse rifles suddenly whined and powered down. The room's localized power grid was failing. Thorne didn't look at the guards. He looked at his fountain pen. Your security systems rely on the same trade validation protocols as your banking, Thorne explained calmly. When the credit flow stops, the authorization keys expire. It's an efficiency measure the hegemony implemented a century ago. It seems no one considered a total liquidity freeze. A low murmur of terror rose from the Tier 1 delegates. If the neural link exchange was down, their empires were effectively blind. The Krillix High Commander slammed a fist onto his balcony rail. Thorne, what have you done? You are a Tier 3 species. You don't have the processing power to hack the exchange. Thorne finally stood, smoothing the front of his suit. We didn't hack anything, Commander. We didn't need to. We simply exercised our rights as the primary maintainers of the sub-ether relay stations in the Orion Arm. He paused, letting the realization sink in. Humans are excellent at infrastructure. We've been the galaxy's janitors and technicians for decades. We don't own the data, but we own the pipes it travels through. And right now, we've turned the valve. Valerius gripped the edge of his podium so hard the stone began to hairline fracture. This is an act of war. You are sabotaging the stability of the entire galactic hegemony to save a single weapon from being sold. Thorne tilted his head slightly. War? No. This is a business dispute. You see, the hegemony hasn't paid its maintenance subsidies for the Orion relays in 3 cycles. We're simply withholding service until the debt is settled. He held up his fountain pen. I have the new contract right here. It includes a clause that the Star Eater be dismantled immediately, as its existence represents an uninsurable risk to galactic trade routes. The stake was now clear. It wasn't just about the weapon, but the survival of the hegemony's very identity as an economic superpower. The Star Eater's containment field flickered. Without the exchange's constant calibration signals, the weapon was becoming unstable. A high-pitched whine began to echo through the atrium, vibrating in the bones of every being present. The delegates who had been bidding billions were now scrambling for the exits, but the automated doors remained locked. Thorne watched the chaos with the detached interest of a scientist. The longer you wait to sign, Overseer, the more fragmented your economy becomes. Every second of this freeze is costing the hegemony 4 quadrillion credits in lost interest. Thorne walked down the gallery steps, moving toward the central dais. The silence he commanded was absolute. Thorne reached the floor of the atrium, his footsteps echoing in the unnatural silence of the dead machines. High Overseer Valerius stood paralyzed as his personal guards stepped aside, their own loyalty wavering as their digital pay accounts remained frozen. The Star Eater is a Tier-0 weapon, Thorne, Valerius managed to choke out, his golden eyes wide. If its containment fails because of your audit, this entire system vanishes. You are committing suicide. Thorne stopped exactly 10 paces from the dais. He didn't look at the trembling marble of the weapon. A common misconception, Overseer. Humans didn't just maintain your relays. We built the containment software for the Star Eater's transport cradle. It's a very robust system. It won't fail, it will simply lock. The Krillix commander roared from his balcony, his mandibles clicking in fury. You expect us to believe you hold the keys to a hegemony superweapon? Thorne turned his head slightly, his expression unchanged. Not the keys, Commander. The patent. The hegemony outsourced the subgrid architecture to Earth's logistics collective 20 years ago to save on labor costs. You wanted a weapon. We gave you a box you can't open without our permission. As he spoke, the erratic pulsing of the Star Eater smoothed into a steady, rhythmic throb. The red error codes on the screens vanished, replaced by a simple, terrifying message in human English. Administrative lock. Earth Logistics Core. A collective gasp surged through the remaining delegates. The Star Eater wasn't a weapon for the hegemony anymore. It was a hostage held by a species they had considered primitive. Valerius collapsed into his ornate chair, the visible weight of an empire's collapse pressing down on him. What do you want? He whispered, the authority finally drained from his voice. Thorne held up his pen again. I want the hegemony to realize that power isn't the ability to destroy a star. It's the ability to ensure the star's energy reaches the people who need it. Your empire is a parasite on the trade routes we built. Today, the parasite finds a new host. He began to unscrew the pen, pulling out a small, glowing data chip. The shift was now irreversible. Thorne walked to the central podium and placed the data chip on the interface. This chip contains the SOL decentralized protocol. It bypasses the neural link exchange entirely. If you sign the new trade agreement, every Tier 1 and Tier 2 civilization here will have their economies restored within minutes, but the hegemony will no longer be the central clearinghouse. You will be a member, Valerius, not a ruler. The stake was no longer just the weapon or the debt, it was the total dismantling of the hegemony's institutional throne. Thorne stood back, his arms crossed, waiting for the first delegate to break rank and sign a deal with Earth. The first to move was the Valorian sovereign. The avian-like leader descended from her balcony, her iridescent robes trailing on the obsidian floor. Without a word to High Overseer Valerius, she approached Thorne and pressed her thumb seal to the digital document projected from his data chip. The sovereignty values the flow of trade over the pride of a dying empire, she stated, her voice echoing through the chamber. Within seconds, a queue of Tier 1 and Tier 2 leaders formed. One by one, they bypassed the hegemony's central dais, effectively voting with their signatures. The hegemony's political gravity was dissolving in real time. Valerius watched from his high throne, his 4 eyes wide as he realized he was no longer a ruler, but a spectator at his own deposition. As the final signature was logged, the Grand Atrium's lights didn't just return, they changed. The harsh, predatory red of the hegemony's emergency system was replaced by the warm, steady amber of Earth's logistics interface. Thorne turned to the Krillix commander, who still stood frozen in his balcony. Commander, your fleet is currently sitting at the edge of the Sol system, waiting for the signal to strike if this auction didn't go your way. Thorne checked his wrist sensor. I've just authorized their fuel cell payments. They now have exactly enough energy to return to your home sector, provided they leave our space within the hour. If they stay, the payment reverses, and they become the most expensive driftwood in the galaxy. High Overseer Valerius slowly stood and descended the dais, his movements heavy and defeated. He stopped before Thorne, looking not at the man, but at the simple fountain pen tucked back into Thorne's breast pocket. You didn't use a single soldier, Valerius whispered. You didn't fire a single shot. Thorne nodded once. Soldiers are expensive, Overseer. They create a mess that someone has to clean up. We prefer to simply change the locks. Thorne reached out and tapped a command on the central console. The containment field around the Star Eater intensified, and the marble-sized weapon began to shrink, compressed by its own internal safeties until it was nothing more than a harmless, inert piece of slag. The ultimate threat was gone, neutralized by a line of code and a trade agreement. The Grand Atrium began to clear as the delegates hurried back to their systems to manage their restored economies. Thorne remained until the last light flickered out. He walked toward the exit, his shadow long against the ancient obsidian walls. Outside, the stars of the galactic core seemed less like distant conquests and more like nodes in a vast, interconnected network. Humanity hadn't conquered the galaxy with fire, they had organized it. As Thorne boarded his shuttle, he took out his pen and a small notebook. He wrote a single sentence: "The pipes are secure." He closed the notebook, the soft thud marking the end of the hegemony era and the quiet beginning of the human one.